Hello everyone and welcome to Action RPG. I'm your host Aaron, and for today's video we're headed to the world of Last Epoch. Mike, one of the senior developers at EHG, co-founder of Last Epoch, was brought on to Tavern Talk, the podcast hosted by Gazzy and Darth Microtransaction, to talk through all things Cycle 2. And I gotta say, 2 teasers, leaks, whatever you want to call them, were brought up during that podcast. So this is going to be a special dev chat Tavern Talk edition. So Mike's going to answer some questions from Gazzy and Darth, and I'm going to show you those 2 teasers. Jumping in to Endgame.
So I'm going to read it out loud here so I don't miss any details on this, because it's kind of a big question. So current state of the Endgame is mainly pushing as high corruption as possible, with the aspirational side content being an endless arena. Now moving forward, is this the type of endgame content that EHG wants the player base to engage with as an endgame content?
Yeah, I think so. I think the so yes, it is the type of content we want people to engage in. I think that there's a lot of room for adding more content in, which is what we're doing. I think there's a major endgame piece coming to every major patch that we've talked about in our we put a little roadmap for the next four major patches, and every single one of them in the roadmap has an end game content piece listed as one of the major things coming for that patch. And I think that's a really important thing, is that like the stuff we have is the sort of content we want people to be engaging with, and we just need more of it. We need more variety, we need more cool stuff to do, and I think what we're going to see is a little bit of a shift in how people engage with the end game a lot of times, and they're still going to be pushing corruption. That's still an important part of it for sure. Having that Pinnacle Boss now that's coming in 1.1, I think that's going to be a huge shift in how people engage with the end game. It's going to be very much a benchmark, like how efficient can I make this kill type of way to engage with the end game. Like you're building your character up, you're trying to make it as powerful as possible, and one of the ways you express that is by doing as hard a content as you can. But it's also how fast you can do fixed difficulty content as well, I think. So there's just a little more variety we're adding in, and also with the nemesis that are coming in, that's going to make the pushing corruption, I think, more fun and more interesting. More that are coming in next cycle and next cycle and next cycle.
That's fair.
When you look at the roadmap that they put out, it shows expansion of the Monolith of Fate. It shows procedurally generated side zones. You know we're going to be getting more dungeons. They want different leaderboards, so not just the arena. And then they've talked about skill sigils, being able to modify all 125 skills. They have talked about potentially a bestiary coming in. There is a lot of end game for the future. Now let's talk Harbinger abilities.
The announcement that you talked about, you said that the Harbingers are going to gain some of the abilities of the timeline bosses, is from our understanding, but I don't think it was brought down in detail. Do you have any more details of that part of it you care to share?
I don't think I'm going to like full details on exactly what's happening, but basically I can give a vague description of it, I think. So once you finish a monolith boss, once you beat that monolith boss, you have and under certain circumstances you'll get ambushed by a Harbinger. And that Harbinger has its own set of abilities. It has its own moveset, all that sort of stuff. But then it takes some of the abilities from the boss you just killed, and it incorporates those into its repertoire. So there's Lagon Harbinger, and there's all of the other bosses. There's a Harbinger that goes with it, and so it's they're each a little bit. The way they behave with those other abilities makes the fights a little bit different.
It kind of brings me to a follow-up question that I'm kind of curious about. So when you were kind of implementing and developing this, where it kind of takes different timeline bosses and, metamorphoses them together into it, did you guys run into any issues where it's like you take this timeline boss ability and this one, and it makes like a major problem that players can't get past or something?
Well, so it only takes from one boss at a time.
Okay.
So we sidestepped that problem right there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that makes sense then.
So when we were watching this live, my chat immediately blew up and said, oh my gosh, Harbinger Lagon. So Lagon's abilities, his beam, you're going to be fighting the Harbinger with that? Yes. Pinnacle Boss, difficulty.
Here that I didn't have the list, but I'm curious about. So when the Pinnacle Boss is supposed to be, Pinnacle content. It's supposed to be difficult, right? So when you're designing this Pinnacle Boss and you're thinking about difficulty in mind, how are you approaching the difficulty? Are you thinking it from a time perspective, where you mentioned, I don't want to see people who've seen it on day one type thing? Are you thinking this is content we want it to take 7, 10, 12 days to get to a point to get it? Or are you thinking it from like a gear perspective, where it's like, I want these guys to have maximum gear, be fully loaded?
Good question.
What's the thought process you're having in terms of meshing difficulty, with where people are going to be at in the launch of a new season, or cycle, I should say?
Yeah. 6 of 1. But yeah, that's a very difficult balancing act to hit the sweet spot on. And I think that it's sort of a mix of everything you just said. So there's like certain things that we have in the progression to getting it, like you have to complete your Harbingers journey. So you have to kill all the 10 Harbingers, and then there's like,
you have to kill all 10. Yes, that is correct, to unlock really the fight.
Then you gain access to the boss fight, and there's stuff that happens in the boss fight and all that sort of stuff. So there are things you have to do in the game that do extend that time, where you can't just like patch drops, knock on the boss's door, I'm fighting him. There are some things there that we do to have that journey be a little bit longer. We don't really want to have it artificially stretched just as like busy work though. So there are things in the boss fight, like you can definitely unlock and start fighting that boss well before your character is really ready to do it. And a big part of why that's like that is we try to incorporate like skill mechanics into the boss fight as well. So there's things like there's things that'll happen in that Pinnacle boss fight where if you're under geared, you can play really, really, really skilled and really, really awesome, and it doesn't matter that you're as under geared. You'll be able to, like, you learn the fight, you learn the mechanics, you can there's some neat little things, little micro optimizations you can do to make that fight a little bit easier. And then like as you get deeper into the cycle, and people's gears gets better and things like that, you'll start to see people being able to fight the boss and ignore those little micro optimizations and things they can do to make the fight easier, because their gear is better and their gear is just picking up that slack for them. So I think it's the having that journey and stretching that time out is more about just giving players different avenues to go on it. And if they're like really just gunning for it hard and they want to practice and just be the best at it themselves and push it as hard as they can. And people who are, hey, I'm going to grind out my gear a little bit more and the fight's going to be a little bit easier because of that, they can do that as well. And
so you could lean on your skill, you could lean on your gear, you can use both. You can wait to fight him, you could fight him early. Now, they have already said that this fight will be in phases. So there's 4 phases to the Pinnacle fight, and each phase is an era inside of Last Epoch. I still have not done it, but it looks like it's going to be a whole lot of fun. Now, during the podcast, while Mike is talking to Gazzy and DM, he is also chatting with EHG, and he got permission to tell us this.
So I think there is room for LP filtering to get into the loot filter here now. Specifically, as you say, because of COF. So as the game evolves, as what's dropping changes, that idea of, hey, maybe it doesn't filter everything perfectly, but it gives you like a really, really good leg up in filtering type thing, where it's like you're filtering almost everything, maybe not everything. That still is something we are interested in. And as the number of with COF especially, there's this huge spike in situations where like, hey, you're getting a bajillion items and it's not doing an adequate job filtering it. So we've kind of swung backwards too far. And so we're going to be bringing that up a little bit with some LP filtering and things like that. There are some changes to the loot filter coming along with that. So you will be able to do, I think it just says if it has LP or not.
That's a good start. Are we talking about this for 1.1 or later?
Yep.
Oh, nice.
I mean, that's big. That has been requested since Legendary Potential has entered the game. So you'll be able to at least toggle if it has LP on your uniques July 9th. EHG continues to be confident about their servers.
You guys prepared for when the people rejoin, come back playing again better basically than the 1.0 release? I think they're referring to the servers there.
Yeah, I mean, we've from 1.0 release and like the weeks after that to now, like in that gap, we changed so much with our networking stack, just like top to bottom. There's been either replacements for systems or major adjustments for systems. There's all sorts of stuff we've done to improve that performance and that experience. And I'm sure it won't be absolutely perfect, but the difference is significant from like, so the base way we like communicate across the network has changed to like even the server providers are different. You know, like it's the whole pipeline has had adjustments and improvements, and it's gonna be a lot better than it was for sure.
Good to hear.
I feel like anytime any studio does something new, there's hiccups with learning that transition, moving to online, game launch, having a bunch of people show up. My concern or my worry is that this is the first time that EHG is we're going to be migrating 1 million accounts that are on cycle, those stash and those characters over to legacy. So since they have never done that before, that is my concern, but I appreciate the confidence. Check out one of the 30 new uniques coming for Cycle 2.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this up here. Right there, I'll cover myself with it, put it on the left-hand side. And why don't you walk us through what we're looking at here?
So now, here, let me make sure I'm looking at the same thing. Yeah, look at the same thing, cool. So this is a new unique item coming for 1.1. If you look in the bottom right corner, first off, this is where I always start looking at uniques, is the level requirement that it has, because that has such a big implication for the legendary system and how that's going to play out. So this is a level 6 unique one-handed sword. I know it looks pretty big. It looks like a two-hander. It's a one-hander. So it's a unique one-handed sword that's going to be great for any strength or attunement character. So it's very hybrid design. So it's 1 melee damage per 2 attunement and 1 spell damage per 2 strength. And then there's some ranges on these other ones below, but the ranges aren't listed here. So it's a chance to cast Smite on melee hit, and chance to cast Smite at 2 additional targets when you cast it directly, and +2 to all attributes. So you get a little bit of that that melee and spell damage from those +2 to all attributes right there in the item as well, which is nice. But I think there's going to be a lot of room for some interesting legendary versions of this that come out, which I'm really excited to see. Self-cast Smite is one of those things that we very rarely see. But it is something that people do a lot while leveling as well. So I think this is going to be a very, very powerful leveling sword. There's a few leveling weapons that are two-handed that are really, really strong right now. And there's a couple one-handers as well, but I think this is going to be a really strong addition to the one-handed leveling sword repertoire. And I think there's going to be room for it a little bit later too.
I have a paladin build titled Holy Smiter. I've been updating this build for years, and we cast Smite directly. Now, something very interesting about this is, again, it's a one-handed sword. What does that mean? It means you could dual wield it. And the fact that it's level 6 means likely this will be an item that you will be able to find 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 legendary potential on. So imagine Endgame having 2 of these, both with 3 LP, being able to direct cast Smite or use it through multi-strike to make your smites. And if you get 100 strength, you're going to have plus 200 to spell damage. It could be very interesting. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, we have come to the final question for Dev Chat Tavern Talk Edition. Awesome job, Gazzy and DM, on this podcast. I have linked their socials in the description and linked the entire podcast. And Mike, as always, thank you for being just so open and awesome with the Last Epoch community. We love you, sir. Now, if everybody didn't know, me and Frosty LaRue have started our own podcast titled Town Portal. Our first guest was senior developer Mike, who is on right now. Our second guest was Hog, and our third guest is going to be Andre, who's the community manager for XD and Torchlight Infinite, and he will be on tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. PT. So we're going to be talking about all things Torchlight Infinite with their new season coming on the 4th of July. So check that out. I'm done. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'm going to allow Mike to take out this video with this last question. Enjoy.
Should we expect a mid-cycle patch to address things that are currently in progress that just won't make it for 1.1?
Yep, there's a few things that I don't want to get your hopes up on specific things, but there are a couple things that you'll see get slipped in where it's just like, oh, this just didn't quite make it through QA, or this didn't quite make it to QA at all, just before the patch. And it's something that we were like, oh, we really want to get this in, and so we will slip a few things in the first few weeks. if it's something that makes sense, yeah.